Have you ever wondered why, despite all your hard work and dedication, prosperity still feels out of reach? It's as though something invisible is holding you back. The truth is, sometimes, without even realizing it, we make mistakes that block the blessings God intends to pour into our lives. These aren't just financial missteps, they're spiritual ones too. And here's the surprising part. Many of these mistakes are incredibly common, even among people of strong faith. But don't worry, there's good news. These obstacles aren't permanent. You can realign your actions with divine principles and experience the abundant life God has planned for you. The Bible overflows with wisdom about finances and spirituality, but the key lies in applying these truths to your daily life. When you do, they have the power to transform everything. So let's uncover 10 common mistakes that might be holding you back. Mistakes that range from financial mismanagement to spiritual attitudes that miss the mark. One major issue is overlooking biblical stewardship. Many people fail to grasp that everything they have is a gift from God. They are stewards, not owners, of these resources. Yet this lack of understanding leads to behaviors that block abundance. Take, for instance, spending without purpose. Ignoring God's guidance in how you use your resources is like burying the talents God has entrusted to you, as described in Matthew 25:14-30. The parable of the talents teaches us that everything we're given is meant to be managed wisely. Every penny has a purpose, whether it's meeting your needs, helping others, or investing in the kingdom. Negligence in this area doesn't attract blessings, it repels them. Picture someone receiving their monthly paycheck only to spend it impulsively on things they don't really need. Without a plan, they end up unable to save for emergencies or invest in long-term goals like education, a home, or their calling. This approach not only limits their financial growth, but also ignores the biblical principle of stewardship. The Bible speaks clearly about this in Proverbs 21:20. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. This verse isn't just about food, it's about how we manage what we've been given. Planning and saving aren't just practical, they're acts of obedience to God. Reckless spending, on the other hand, reveals a disconnect from divine values. How can God trust us with more if we neglect to care for what we already have? Good stewardship isn't about being stingy. It's about honoring the gifts you've received. When we manage our resources wisely, we show others the impact of living according to God's principles. Our faith becomes a testimony, creating ripples of inspiration that reach far beyond our own lives. It's through this faithful management that we prepare ourselves for greater blessings. After all, how can anyone prosper without a plan? This brings us to another significant mistake, a lack of gratitude, especially for small beginnings. Gratitude is a spiritual key that unlocks the doors to prosperity. When you fail to appreciate the little you have, you unintentionally devalue what God has already entrusted to you. In Luke 16:10, it says, "Whoever is faithful in very little will also be faithful in much." God observes how we handle the small things before entrusting us with greater blessings. When we show ingratitude, it creates a barrier, a spiritual blockage that stops the flow of new opportunities and resources. Think about it. When someone looks at their modest situation and grumbles, they miss the chance to honor the seeds of greatness God has planted. Gratitude, however, works in the opposite way. It magnifies blessings and paves the way for more. When you thank God for small beginnings, you acknowledge His hand in your life, and that acknowledgement is the foundation for growth. So, as you reflect on your journey, ask yourself, am I honoring what I have? Am I faithful with the little so I can be trusted with much? These questions aren't just about money, they're about your heart, your mindset, and your willingness to align with divine principles. When you embrace stewardship and gratitude, you're not just opening the door to prosperity, you're stepping into the abundant life God has been waiting to give you. Picture someone who constantly complains about their salary or job, focusing only on what's lacking and never recognizing the potential of what's already there. This mindset blinds them to opportunities for growth and keeps them stuck in a cycle of negativity. What if, instead, they chose gratitude? Gratitude shifts your perspective, turning a dead-end job into a stepping stone for something greater. It opens your eyes to the possibilities right in front of you, new skills to learn, connections to build, or ideas that can lead to better opportunities. Think of the widow of Zarephath in 1 Kings 17:10-16, who, despite her limited resources, offered her small portion with faith and gratitude. God multiplied what she gave, providing for her and her household during a time of great need. This story reminds us that when we approach our current circumstances with appreciation, we make room for God's provision and abundance to manifest in our lives. Gratitude doesn't mean settling for less. It means valuing the present while preparing for greater things. When we embrace gratitude, we also acknowledge God's sovereignty over every aspect of our lives. It's not just about being thankful, it's about trusting that even our current struggles are part of His bigger plan. On the other hand, ingratitude leads to dissatisfaction, often pushing us into impulsive decisions like jumping from one job to another without a clear purpose or accumulating debt in an attempt to fill an emotional void. Gratitude acts as a powerful magnet for blessings, transforming not only our hearts but also our circumstances. It helps us cultivate a sense of responsibility, preparing us to manage the abundance that comes with God's provision. But how does this attitude of gratitude tie into our relationship with giving, especially tithes and offerings? This is where many people miss out on a significant spiritual principle: the importance of tithes and offerings. Neglecting tithes and offerings is like walking away from a covenant of divine provision. In Malachi 3:10, God makes a bold promise: "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Yet many view tithing as a financial burden instead of recognizing it as an act of faith and obedience. Imagine someone who hesitates to tithe because they fear they won't have enough left to cover their expenses. This fear reveals a misplaced trust in personal effort over God's provision. But when we give to God what is His, we declare that He is our ultimate provider, even in uncertain times. Consider the widow in Mark 12:41-44, who gave 2 small coins, all she had, with a heart full of faith. Her offering was small in value, but immense in trust, and Jesus commended her for it. Offerings are equally significant. They go beyond obligation, serving as expressions of gratitude and love. They're an act of sowing into God's kingdom. As Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 9:6, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." Giving isn't just about money, it's about faith, trust, and aligning our priorities with God's purpose. Some people neglect tithing because they misunderstand its purpose, viewing it as a loss rather than an investment. But tithing with joy and faith unlocks spiritual and material blessings. The challenge arises when financial limitations like overwhelming debt seem to make tithing impossible. This brings us to the next major obstacle: the burden of unplanned debt. Breaking free from the cycle of debt is one of the greatest barriers to prosperity, chaining people to financial obligations that drain their resources and peace of mind. Proverbs 22:7 warns us, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." Accumulating debt without planning or purpose not only suffocates financial freedom, but also moves us further away from God's principles of provision and wisdom. Picture someone who frequently relies on credit cards for unnecessary purchases, often spending beyond their means. Over time, they find themselves buried under high-interest payments, using a significant portion of their income just to service their debts. This cycle of dependency leaves little room for saving, investing, or giving, creating a constant sense of lack and anxiety. God's desire is for His people to live in freedom, and that includes financial freedom. Breaking free from the trap of debt requires a combination of discipline, planning, and faith. It's not enough to pray for provision. We must also take practical steps to manage our resources wisely. For example, creating a budget, prioritizing debt repayment, and avoiding impulsive purchases can help rebuild financial stability. Faith in God's provision doesn't mean ignoring our responsibilities. It means trusting Him to meet our needs while we take steps to align our actions with His principles. When we balance practical wisdom with spiritual trust, we create space for God's blessings to flow into our lives. Gratitude, stewardship, and discipline are the keys to unlocking financial freedom and divine abundance. When we honor what we've been given, no matter how small, we position ourselves to receive even greater blessings. And when we trust God as our provider, we discover that His resources are limitless. Trusting God's provision. Through stewardship, Philippians 4:19 reminds us of God's faithfulness to provide for our needs. And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Christ Jesus. However, trusting in His provision doesn't mean neglecting our responsibilities as stewards. God expects us to take practical steps to manage our resources wisely. Creating a budget is like giving your finances a roadmap, telling every dollar where to go instead of wondering where it went. Cutting unnecessary expenses and seeking financial counseling can help overcome debt and pave the way toward prosperity. A heart aligned with God finds wisdom to manage limitations without falling into despair or recklessness. Living within our means doesn't limit us. It opens the door for God to multiply what we already have. Prosperity isn't about endless wealth, but about managing resources faithfully and allowing God to guide us into abundance. Yet, debt is only part of the challenge. What about the emotional traps of greed and fear that often dominate financial decisions? The dual trap: greed and fear of investing. Greed and fear of investing are like two shadows blocking the light of God's provision. On one hand, greed pushes us to hoard wealth without purpose, as if we're the sole providers for ourselves. On the other hand, fear causes us to hesitate, avoiding opportunities for growth and multiplication. Both stem from a lack of trust in God's sovereignty over our finances. Ecclesiastes 11:4 warns us against hesitation. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. Imagine a farmer who waits for perfect weather to sow seeds. They miss the planting season entirely. Similarly, when we allow fear or greed to control us, we miss opportunities to grow what God has entrusted to us. Take the parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30, where the servant who buried his single talent out of fear was rebuked for his inaction. God doesn't call us to sit on His blessings, but to steward them boldly, trusting Him to bring the increase. Keeping money hidden away or in low-risk accounts may seem safe, but it reflects a scarcity mindset, one that limits God's ability to bless us further. The solution lies in balance. While greed can close our hearts to generosity, fear of investing can stifle growth. Seeking financial education, whether through books, courses, or mentors, equips us with the knowledge to make wise decisions. Learning about investments in stocks, real estate, or small businesses is an act of stewardship, especially when paired with prayer and discernment. When we align our financial goals with God's purpose, investing becomes an act of faith. It multiplies resources, not only for personal use, but also for building His kingdom. To make this possible, a clear plan rooted in biblical principles is essential. The danger of living without a financial plan. Living without a financial plan is like wandering in the wilderness without a compass. You might move, but you'll never arrive. Proverbs 21:5 offers this truth. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. A financial plan is not just a practical tool, it's a reflection of obedience to God's call for diligence and stewardship. Imagine someone who spends impulsively, never keeping track of their income or expenses. At first, this may seem manageable, but over time, the lack of structure results in mounting debt, missed opportunities, and an inability to prepare for emergencies. A life without a plan leads to unnecessary stress, leaving people vulnerable to financial crises that could have been avoided with foresight. In contrast, those who plan experience peace even during uncertain times. A strong financial plan starts with a simple yet effective budget. This budget should prioritize essentials like housing and food, include tithes and offerings as acts of worship, and leave room for savings and investments. Preparing for the future also means building an emergency fund for unexpected events, such as illness or job loss, and investing in long-term goals like retirement. Financial planning is more than just crunching numbers, it's an act of trust in God. By diligently organizing what He has entrusted to us, we demonstrate faithfulness to His provision. However, planning must come from a place of faith, not comparison. Measuring our financial progress against others leads to dissatisfaction, envy, and wasted energy. Instead of asking, "Why don't I have what they have?" focus on asking, "Am I honoring God with what I've been given?" This shift in mindset prepares us to avoid another common mistake, letting comparisons rob us of contentment. The danger of constantly comparing yourself to others. Constantly comparing yourself to others is like running a race where the finish line keeps moving. It's exhausting, unproductive, and steals your peace. The Bible gives us clear wisdom in Galatians 6:4-5. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load. This verse reminds us that God has uniquely designed each person's journey, making comparisons not only unnecessary, but harmful to our spiritual and emotional well-being. Picture someone scrolling endlessly through social media, feeling overwhelmed by snapshots of other people's lives, their vacations, promotions, or new purchases. What they don't see are the struggles and sacrifices behind those images. This habit feeds a scarcity mindset, where the focus is on what's missing rather than on the abundant blessings God has already provided. It clouds the heart with dissatisfaction and discouragement, preventing us from celebrating our own progress. Comparison also distorts financial priorities. Many people fall into the trap of spending money on things they don't need to keep up with others. This impulsive behavior pulls them further away from their goals and God's plan for their resources. Recognizing that God has given each person unique talents, blessings, and paths is the first step to breaking free from this trap. To combat this, develop a daily practice of gratitude. Start by writing down 3 things you're thankful for each day. This simple habit shifts your focus from others to what God is actively doing in your own life. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to comparison. It aligns your perspective with God's timing and plan for your life. Freeing yourself from the weight of comparison allows you to steward your resources more wisely and embrace the blessings that God has prepared for you. But even when focusing on gratitude, it's important to consider where you're getting your financial advice. That leads to the next potential mistake. The risk of following ungodly. Financial advice can be life-changing, but only when it comes from the right source. The Bible offers a stern warning in Psalm 1:1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. This verse underscores the importance of being cautious about whom we allow to influence our decisions, especially regarding finances. Imagine a scenario where someone invests their savings in a high-risk scheme because a persuasive friend convinced them It was a sure thing. At first it seems promising, but when the venture crumbles, they realize the advice was driven by greed rather than wisdom. Ungodly financial guidance often prioritizes quick gains over ethical or lasting stewardship, leading to regret and unnecessary loss. On the other hand, seeking advice from professionals who share Christian values or consulting with trusted spiritual leaders provides counsel rooted in godly principles. Before acting on any financial guidance, take time to pray and reflect. Ask God to reveal whether the advice aligns with His Word and His will for your life. Additionally, equipping yourself with financial education is a safeguard against poor decisions. Reading trustworthy resources while filtering them through a biblical perspective can help you discern what's wise and what's not. Remember, the voices you choose to listen to shape your financial and spiritual future. When your financial choices are aligned with God's principles, they lead not only to material stability, but also to spiritual growth. As we navigate financial decisions with discernment, we must also be mindful of the balance between material and spiritual prosperity. The trap of prioritizing material prosperity. Over-spiritual growth focusing only on material prosperity is like building a house on sand. It might look impressive at first, but it won't endure the storms of life. Jesus reminds us in Matthew 6:33, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." This verse places a clear priority on spiritual growth over material wealth. When material success becomes the sole focus, it can easily turn into an idol, pulling us away from God's true purpose for our lives. Imagine someone who works tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder or grow their bank account, but neglects prayer, Bible study, and serving others. While their wealth may increase, their relationships, inner peace, and connection with God suffer. True prosperity is holistic. It includes not just financial stability, but also joy, peace, and an intimate relationship with God. Mark 8:36 poses a profound question. What good is it to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul? Without spiritual grounding, even the greatest material successes can feel hollow. To maintain balance, prioritize time for spiritual practices. Regular devotionals, serving in ministries, and giving to causes that glorify God anchor your heart in His purposes. Material blessings are not wrong in themselves, but they should be a byproduct of seeking God, not the primary focus. By aligning your goals with heaven, you'll find that material prosperity naturally follows spiritual growth. When the foundation is built on seeking God's kingdom first, both your finances and your faith will be equipped to weather any storm. This balanced perspective is key to living a life of abundance and purpose. Facing challenges with perseverance. The balance between material and spiritual prosperity is often tested most during challenging times. Difficulties have a way of shaking our faith and tempting us to abandon the path God has prepared for us. Yet, how we respond to trials can either lead us closer to His promises or cause us to miss out on the blessings waiting just ahead. The Bible reminds us in James 1:12, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." Picture a hiker climbing a steep mountain trail. Halfway up, the path becomes rocky, the air thinner, and the weight of the journey feels unbearable. Turning back seems tempting. What the hiker doesn't realize is that the most breathtaking view awaits just a few more steps ahead. Similarly, challenges in life are not meant to defeat us, but to refine our character, deepen our faith, and prepare us for greater heights. Perseverance is not easy, but it is necessary. Challenges are a part of life, and God uses them to teach us patience, resilience, and reliance on Him. Think of Job, who faced unimaginable loss and suffering, yet held on to his faith. In the end, God restored him, blessing him even more abundantly than before. Persevering through difficulties doesn't just build character, it strengthens our relationship with God and demonstrates trust in His timing. Instead of giving up, consider trials as opportunities for growth. When you feel overwhelmed, pray for strength and guidance. Surround yourself with encouraging voices, friends, family, or spiritual mentors who can remind you of God's promises. Reflect on past challenges you've overcome and remember how God was faithful through them. Giving up might seem easier in the moment, but perseverance carries the promise of a reward far greater than the temporary relief of quitting. As you continue walking with faith through hardships, you'll discover that challenges are not obstacles, but stepping stones toward God's best for you. When we embrace perseverance, we align ourselves with God's purpose, ready to step into the fullness of His plan. It is this steadfastness that leads us to live a life of victory and blessing, even in the face of adversity.